Hi guys, welcome back to chapter 12. This is video 2 with Professor Ren. So we were discussing egalitarian societies, and we want to know, is that the answer? Would it be better to structure a society where social welfare is predominantly or very, very important? And so what happens in egalitarian societies, wealth distribution is bigger. The idea of taxing those with higher income more and shifting the resources to the center and keeping as many people to the middle. So think of an economy as looking like a barrel, whereas, the girth, the biggest part of its girth is in the center. That's what we're looking at. But when we really are looking at our own society, we are finding that it is often looking like an inverted pyramid or triangle, where it's heavy on top. By that I mean, instead of the wealth being distributed mostly to the center, it's distributed mostly to the top. In the United States, we have the fastest growing income inequality of all developed nations and the biggest income inequality of all developed nations, more than Canada, more than European nations, especially the ones in the OECD. It's just something that tells you about the fact that we really don't necessarily in this country do enough of that. Now, this is a matter of opinion and there's political aspects to it, but those are just simply facts on the ground. So what are the pros and the cons? Okay. Egalitarian societies like Denmark have a lower crime rate because there's lower poverty rates. And we definitely know in economics that they go hand in hand. I mean, study after study shows that when people take risks and commit crimes, it's because they feel that they don't really have another option. Now, there are obviously people who are, inclined to criminal activity because of some mental issues. So we're not discussing that. We're saying when people feel they don't have a future, they can't get enough work, they can't earn enough income, their health is only suffering, their families are only suffering, etc. And those people are more likely to take a risk that they wouldn't otherwise have taken. Higher quality education. Because education is all-inclusive, meaning if you have the grade, the system is going to train you, if you can't make it to college, they will train you in something. There's money to make sure that you have a profession of some sort. Then we're going to find that more people are able to actually acquire higher degrees. Look, achievement requires access, not just hard work. And this is what this is showing us. A bigger percentage of society enjoys financial security. That's because there are so many. For instance, you have better access to museums, to public transportation, to healthcare, because healthcare is also included, to even activities. Like, for instance, if you are a competitor, if you want to compete, doesn't have to be the Olympics. If you're a competitive hurdler or runner, then there is more money dedicated to you achieving those things. They also tend to die better. And when I say die better, when we look at how we die towards the end of our lives, the last 3 to 5 years of our lives in the United States, we are very ill. We're on a lot of medications. We spend so much money. We spend the bulk of the healthcare expenses, and we're speaking $300,000 to $400,000. We're not talking about $3,000 and $4,000. This is how much we can end up spending on healthcare only towards the end of our lives. But because they live healthier lives, because they have preventative care, because of the nationalized healthcare, you find that it's diet, it's fresh air, it's other factors. They end up dying better than us. They don't really end up having so many years of misery, of spending all their money pretty much, as well as, just being from doctor to doctor to doctor. Danes take more time off. In Sweden, for instance, the country gives at least a month off and encourages people, even funds their travels to leave the country to expose them to other cultures. So, so there's definitely work less, spend more time at home, explore your aspects, your creative aspects. It's just the life is structured more towards living a happier life instead of a richer life. The emphasis is on well-being, wellness, happiness, more than it is on how many things do I have and how expensive are they. Cons. Much higher tax rate, right? If you make more money, you're going to be forking up a bigger chunk of your income. There is definitely much more assistance for childcare or for other programs as well. Keep in mind that egalitarian societies tend to be composed of homogeneous, relatively small populations. Okay, I would like to focus on that a little bit. In the United States, we are a massive melting pot, and I'm sure you know because you've traveled. If you will visit Maine, you get a very different feel than if you visit Tennessee, than if you visit California or Utah. You can't say, I've been to New York City, I've seen the United States. No, you've seen New York City. You haven't even seen Albany, for instance, or Buffalo. Those are very, very different places than New York City, and it's all one state, the state of New York. So we know that in the United States, culture differs drastically from corner to corner. So we're going to disagree more. We're going to share less values. We're going to conflict more. We have the whole concept of states versus the federal government. What the federal government does is one thing, but what states do is very different. I mean, if you compare the laws of California to the laws of Kentucky, for instance, or, the laws of Arkansas, oh my goodness. I mean, they might as well not be the same country. So what we're looking at here is it's much easier when the population is much smaller and the people who live in it for thousands of years, not just hundreds of years, have shared the same language, food, attitude, outlook. It's going to be much easier for them to come together and create a consensus of some sort. Okay. Let's see here. Poverty threshold in the United States. I was saying to you before that we consider about 47 million people to be poor, and I was telling you it's much more than that. Here's why. In the United States, if you're a family of 4, okay, well, imagine, now these numbers are 2021, so we're not like looking back at some 50 years. If you make more than $44,660 and you are a family of 8, actually in this one, you are not considered poor. Now, take a family of 4 living on $26,500. I alone cannot live on $26,500. I don't know how a family of 4 can. So if you make more than that, the government considers you not poor. What economists say is this number should be twice as big before you can consider somebody not poor. In other words, economists say these numbers are ridiculously low and they leave out a lot of people who definitely are poor. And when you're poor, you know you are. You struggle every single week. You don't have food security to a great extent. You might not have reliable transportation. You have no savings. You cannot afford food that keeps you healthy. You cannot afford enough health care. You probably skip seeing the doctor when you should go because you can't afford that extra bill that you're going to be getting. And the list is just long. So economists disagree. Economists consider more like maybe not exactly a third of Americans as being poor, but maybe 29% of Americans as being poor versus, something like 12%. Or 11% as far as the government looks at. So we really consider, or 15%. I mean, the government says about 1/6, right? So the government is basically saying that about 15% of the population is poor or close to it. And economists are saying more like 30% or close to it. That keep it simpler. Now, absolute poverty versus relative poverty. This is where it gets really tricky. We can identify the absolute poor with more ease. Now, the absolute poor, condition where household income is insufficient to afford basic necessities like food, shelter, clothing. Somebody is homeless without subsidized housing, they're definitely homeless. They absolutely do not have enough food without somebody giving them some sort of additional assistance with it. So we're talking about people who can't, almost like their survival is in jeopardy. Relative poverty, when households receive 50% less income than the average median income. So this is somebody we consider uncomfortable. Now, let me tell you this. A lot of people who are considered relatively poor absolutely have all the symptoms of somebody who is poor. And when I say the symptoms of somebody who is poor, I mean they really don't have the necessities to be healthy, have a sense of well-being, have a good outlook, have ambitions. They're hindered drastically. They either don't find a job that makes them feel good about themselves, or if they do, that job has some long hours and low pay. So many people are considered relatively poor. And when I look at the statistics of the past, 5 years or so, I would tell you at least half of Americans feel that they are at minimum relatively poor, meaning They can't save for retirement. They can't access $1,000 in cash in an emergency in a savings account. They have less than that. If their car breaks down, they cry, you know, they feel like, oh my God, well, how am I going to pay for this repair? It's so big and it's going to take me forever. And I'm going to end up having to pay a lot of interest on it. You probably can find more people associate with this picture than I can go on vacations, you know, at least once or twice a year. I have at least $5,000 access in cash. I have a stock portfolio that's growing. I am, you know, according to my age where I need to be in savings towards my retirement. I have a good health care plan. I eat well. I rarely see a doctor. My kids go to good schools. I live in a safe neighborhood. You see this picture? This picture I'm drawing used to be more common. It used to be when the economy in the United States was really more like a barrel and the middle class was the biggest of them all. And now the middle class is no longer really the biggest. Not in practical means. No, it's not. You have more people who associate with being poor or feel like their lives are poor based on this picture that I just described, or people who have a lot of comfort. And those who fit truly in the middle class, that's shrinking drastically. Okay, I'll see you in video 3.